I'm Paula Ripple. I'm a certified professional organizer and the owner of OrganizeWell. And if you are familiar with Zoom, don't hesitate to drop a hello in the chat or ask any questions. I will have a Q&A at the end. And if you're not familiar with Zoom, don't hesitate to just raise your hand on the screen and I'll try to ask any questions, answer any questions as we go. So again, if you're just now joining us, I'm Paula Ripple, and I started my career as a professional organizer with no intent whatsoever to focus on senior downsizing. However, I kept getting calls from folks in their 50s and older who had bad moving experiences, or they were trying to help their parents or in-laws navigate a large downsize and move. I'm a former project manager, and I realized that a lot of these clients did many of the right steps, but they did not get great outcomes. A large downsizing project can go sideways just from getting a few critical tasks out of order or underestimating the volume of work that's involved in a big downsize. And, true about me is I am also part of that sandwich generation where I am caught between my kids and my parents and in-laws. And personally, I also downsized in 2020 and we moved from the home that we had spent 2 decades in. So not only do I do this professionally, but I also understand personally how overwhelming a big downsize like this can be. So I want to start by sharing a client story with you. And the names have been changed to protect the innocent. A realtor I work with a lot called me and asked me if I could help a client. And I met that client, Chris, in October of 2023. And her story is the perfect example of how you can do all the right things in the wrong order and just get a disaster of a result. Chris had a lovely home in a great neighborhood in McHenry County. Home was beautifully constructed. It had a great floor plan. It was beautifully decorated and landscaped. And when she was beginning her downsizing process in 2022, I don't know if you remember, but the housing market was extremely hot. Houses were selling within, hours of being posted on the MLS. So she had made the decision, since house sales were so attractive, that she was going to go ahead and sell her Illinois home and move full-time to Florida at her second home that she'd owned for some time. So she asked friends to come and help her go through things and downsize. Great idea. Accountability partners are definitely very helpful when we are in the downsizing process. And her friends realized how few things that she would actually be moving because her home in Florida was already decorated, already furnished, and there's a lot of things from the Midwest that, homes that don't necessarily translate to a Florida home. So they suggested that she have an estate sale. Also a great idea because she was not taking a lot of things with her. They were not moving with her. So they needed to have another place to go. So she hired an estate sale company, but she had not yet talked to a realtor. And this was the first misstep, if you can call it that. She didn't have, I mentioned that the home was beautifully decorated. It was a great neighborhood. If she had brought in a realtor earlier, she could have had the home photographed before the estate sale company was on site. And she would have been able to put the house on the market with great photos. Instead, the estate sale company came in and they did exactly what they were contracted to do. They take down all the art, they de-decorate the house, they empty out the cabinets and the furniture and the closets, and they merchandise the home like a store because that's what it is for 3 days. And they let a lot of people in and they come in over that 3-day period and they try to sell as much as they can. Now, Chris had opted not to have the estate sale company do the cleanup. She was already a little surprised. They charged a 40% commission, and she felt it didn't make sense to pay extra to have them clean up. So they did exactly what they were contracted to do at the end of the sale, which is they took the things that didn't sell off their tables, folded their tables, and walked right out the door, leaving her home a complete disaster. So after the sale, Chris came to visit her home, and as she's walking through what looked to her to be a wrecked home, she was realizing that her beautiful cream carpet had been horribly stained during the sale with big, greasy black streaks. And she was so upset that she packed up and she went to Florida and she left the Illinois house to sit for 9 months. When she left town, interest rates were under 3%. In October 2023, when we were meeting and working to get the house in order so that we could get those real estate photos and start marketing the home, interest rates had jumped up to 7%. She had missed one of the hottest and most lucrative housing markets that we may see for a very long time. And not to mention that, she had experienced an enormous amount of stress and regret in her choices. So that is one of the biggest things I do when I work with families who are moving or downsizing. I work to guide them through the best options for their situations. Moving is always going to be one of life's most stressful events, but by taking the right actions in the right order, we can prevent move disasters and make the whole experience as stress-free as possible. And I'm sure that after hearing Chris's story, you may be thinking, there is no way we're having an estate sale. And I truly don't mean to scare you. There are situations when an estate sale is the very best choice. And my goal is to walk you through those situations so that you can make the best choice for you and also to avoid any pitfalls. So let's talk about our homes first. UCLA did a study on clutter, and they studied the average American family. They picked a bunch of young families in the LA area, and the study was done about 12 years ago. One of the findings of that study is that the average American home has over 300,000 items in it. Now, I mentioned that the study was done a while ago, and it was younger families in the LA area. I would say that for a family in the Midwest that is over 50, they're living in a home with a basement, they've been in that home for a decade or more, they have an Amazon Prime membership, and they've gone through the hoarding that we all experienced during the pandemic, that number could be closer to 1 million items in some of the houses I work in. Now, for senior downsizing or an estate settlement, the family may only be keeping 10, 20, 30% of the actual contents of the home. However, if the intent is to sell the home, all those remaining things have to go somewhere. They can't stay. The new owners really won't want them. In fact, real estate contracts are written with a default to spell out that the home must be broom clean at closing. That means everything has to be moved. All the stuff off the garage shelves and out from under the sinks, and the paint that's squirreled away in the back of the basement, and the items that were shoved up in attics and in other storage areas, it all has to go. So that is the value of an estate sale, is it allows us to liquidate a large amount of possessions in a short amount of time. Like any liquidation sale, the goal is not to get top dollar, but it is to sell out. And a lot of clients initially struggle with the commission fee that estate sale companies charge and how they price items because they are thinking that they're going to sell things for top dollar. And I like to remind people is that is not really your goal when you're selling your house, is to get top dollar for your things. It is to get top dollar for your house. For many Americans, their largest asset by far is their home. And if you've been in your home for a decade or more, you've seen some pretty significant appreciation in the value of your home. So we want to showcase that home and sell it for the best possible price, and not to get hung up on the contents of the home to the detriment of actually selling our biggest asset. And in fact, the faster that you can sell the home, which is something that estate sales can help us with, is that speeding up the timeline, the less expense you're going to incur. When you own a home, you're paying utilities, you're paying for maintenance fees, and you're paying property tax. So let me tell you another client story. A realtor called me when Lewis was 28 days from closing on a large home that he had been in for 40 years, and he had shared that home for much of his life with his mother, who had passed away. So the home was full of his possessions, all 4 floors, along with his mother's. And he wanted to keep mostly his personal possessions and his musical instruments. He planned to move out of state in the spring and look for a small place out of state. So when we first met Lewis, we knew that we were under a really, really tight timeline. It was a 30-day close, and we were 28, we were already 2 days into that timeline. So when we realized how few things he was actually taking with him, we thought, let's see if we can possibly fit an estate sale into this timeline. So we interviewed estate sale companies, and we did find one that had availability the weekend prior to the sale. So in that time leading up to the sale, we worked overtime with Lewis to identify and secure the things he wanted to keep, packing as we went. And normally I don't like keeping the items that the client plans to move on site. I prefer to move the client and their things and then have the estate sale. But we were on such a short timeline that we couldn't make it work. But we could identify 2 bedrooms that were mostly empty, so we moved his things into those bedrooms and locked the doors and taped the doors so that they wouldn't be disturbed during the sale. The estate sale company, we urged him to go ahead and pay for the cleanup fee so that the home would be broom clean at the end of the sale. So the sale was on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. On Monday morning, they had donation trucks lined up. They had a dumpster put on the driveway, and by Monday evening, the house was broom clean. Movers came in, and we moved him to his new apartment on Tuesday, and cleaners came in on Wednesday to clean the whole house top to bottom. And then on Thursday, he was able to close on the house. So in this case, the estate sale was a really valuable tool that kind of helped us get to meet that tight deadline and control cost. He actually made $8,000 on the sale, if I remember right, instead of paying someone to take a lot of donations back and forth and process things. So it was a great solution for him. So I want to be sure that you have a happy story and not a horror story. So here are my suggestions for having a successful estate sale. If you feel that an estate sale is a possible solution for your large downsize, the first step in the process is not to focus on what is being sold, but to focus on what you are definitely going to keep. And that's different for every move, but I like to tell people it's what you love, need, use, and what's actually going to fit in the new home. This is a big part of when I work with people. I'm making sure that we understand that new floor plan and we pack the new home almost like a big piece of luggage so that when they arrive at their new destination that things actually fit. So the first thing that we want to do is identify what they're keeping. And I've seen clients and their family members put together really elaborate spreadsheets listing everything in the home and its destination, but I suggest making it a little more simple. Like a lot of senior move managers, I use blue painter's tape and I blue tape the house. For the number one reason, it's faster. It's as simple as walking through the home and adding a piece of blue tape to every piece of furniture and to the art on the walls and the items that you wish to keep. Using blue tape also makes your decisions visible to all other members, interested stakeholders, and family members. So when they walk into a room, they can instantly see what decisions have been made. And as you're interviewing movers and estate sale companies, they can see what's not been marked so they know what to include in their estimates. My second tip, I've learned from the experts over the last 14 years. Don't throw anything away unless it's obvious trash or like expired food. I know one time I was working with a client and we weren't doing an estate sale, but we were taking some of the better things to an auction house at the end of the day. And we found this weird metal thing. And I remember taking a photo of it, sending it to the auction house owner. And he looked at it. He's like, I can't tell what it is, but throw it in because I want to look at it. Well, that weird piece of metal that the client and I both probably would have put in the trash if we hadn't got better guidance turned out to be a vintage toy from the 1920s. It was a toy cannon that actually fired a marble up to 20 feet, which makes me wonder what kind of toys they gave kids in the 1920s. But at auction, it sold for $90. So don't assume that something's trash or something doesn't have value. Another surprise for me was a big stack of plastic cups that a client had brought back every time that they had gone to Vegas, one of their favorite locations. So from the 70s, 80s, 90s, they always brought back plastic cups with different casinos logos on them. And they actually did really well in a estate sale because apparently vintage Vegas items are hot right now. And my final tip is understand how that, the timeline of an estate sale. I mentioned doing the right things in the right order is key to success. So once you've contracted with an estate sale company, you can't remove anything from the sale. I talked about what estate sale companies charge. A lot of times it's 40%. That's pretty much very close to the national average for our area. What that 40% covers is the cost of them conducting the sales. Even in an average size home, it's a week of work. In slightly larger homes, it's going to be up to 2 weeks of work. So the estate sale company workers are going to come in, they're going to pull everything out of storage, and they're going to review things. They're going to put like with like. They're going to clean things, and they're going to photograph so that things can be marketed. So it's a lot of work. And their marketing is very important to them because a lot of times estate sale companies will have dealers or collectors that are part of their mailing list, and they will come to a sale specifically because of what's been advertised in those photos. So they're expecting to see it. Another organizer had a situation recently when it was an estate settlement, and a family member came in the night before the sale. They came in from out of state, and they were let into the house, and they took many of the valuable things that the estate sale company had already staged and photographed. And actually the sale was the very next morning. So the next morning, the estate sale company owner was furious, and the homeowner was in breach of contract, or in this case, the estate executor was in breach of contract. So we just kind of want to be understanding of how that timeline works, and we need to be sure we are communicating with that timeline. So before the sale, again, in an ideal situation, the client would move out of their home, and they would take with them all the things that they intend to keep, and that we would be sure that we are communicating the timeline with family and other stakeholders, so that if we did want to share things with family, they came in and had the opportunity to pick up things well before the estate sale timeline started. So we've made the decision to have an estate sale. How do we find a good estate sale company? Like all other things, ask for recommendations. Ask your neighbors, ask your friends, and your realtor. Your realtor would have great advice. Remember, but do take that advice with a grain of salt, because a lot of times people will have a perception that they didn't have a successful estate sale, but a lot of times they maybe don't understand, how an estate sale, that estate sale is a liquidation tool. Look at estatesales.net. It's a website where estate sale companies advertise their sales, and they'll have all their photos, and their upcoming sales will be on that website. Look at who is operating in your area or having a lot of sales in your area. Do they take good photos? Do they have a good website? Are they conducting sales frequently? Those are all good signs. So that's a great way to get a list of companies that you can interview. And I always recommend that you interview more than 2 estate sale companies. And that advice also extends to movers. Interview more than 2. Ask for a copy of the contract and review that contract and compare it before signing. And in that contract, be sure that the estate sale company is spelling out how they handle record keeping of sales. Are they keeping receipts? Will they share the receipts with you? And when do they pay out? The standard is usually 1 to 2 weeks after the sale. Also, there's actually a professional association, the American Society of Estate Sale Liquidators, or State Liquidators. And this is just that extra level of professionalism and connection that an estate sale company may have. So be sure to ask them, do they belong to any professional associations? Do they belong to, do they have appraiser certificates and things like that? And when you're interviewing someone, some good questions to ask are, how do they market? Do they have a website? And where do they advertise the sale? Do they advertise on social media? Do they send out a mailing letter? And how many people are on their mailing list? How many people normally attend their sales? Another good question is ask them about their business. How long have they been in business under that name? I've heard folks say that they've been in business for 15 years, but then when you ask more questions, you find out that they've been working part-time for other estate sale companies for 14 years and they just started their own business. Doesn't necessarily mean they won't do a great job, but it is information that you need to have to make your best decision. Do they have a store? Or do they have online stores like Etsy or eBay? Some estate sellers may may give you the recommendation that those are better avenues to sell some items to get more value. And speaking of value, ask them how they determine how to price things. And if you do have some things that you feel have value, can you set a minimum price for those items so that if the minimum price is not met, can you remove them from the sale or sell them through a um, different avenue like eBay? And a word of caution here. The value of things has changed dramatically in the last few years. And I don't know if it's because we have a lot of people who are decluttering, and we also have a lot of people who feel like they have clutter in their homes. So the antiques and the furniture and the beautiful dishes may not have a great value. And I always try to caution people is try not to take it personally when a professional is telling you that your things aren't going to sell well. They know firsthand what market value is. They work with it all the time. That is their area of expertise. And that doesn't mean that those things don't have sentimental value. But listen, because if there are things in your home that will surprise you, that will sell very well, and it's probably not the china. And of course, the very nature of an estate sale is that you're going to open the door to your home and invite a whole bunch of people in. It is a major security issue, so we need to protect ourselves and our biggest asset, our home. Does the estate sale company have insurance and liability, and can they provide proof of insurance? Are their workers actual employees, and do they carry workers' comp? There have been huge changes to the laws that govern the use of contractors versus employees in the last year. And you really don't want to be caught up in a situation where the federal government is finding a company for the illegal use of subcontractors. How is the estate sale company going to protect your home? Remember Chris's example of where her carpets were terribly stained. Can they put down floor protection? Or have the shoppers wear booties when they come into the space? And how do they handle security during the sale? I have a lot of friends who are estate sale company owners, and they tell me stories that I'm just shocked at how people can be. So I know that they have security processes in place to prevent people from walking off with valuable things or unlocking windows and coming back later. So these are questions you really want to be sure that you understand when you're interviewing a company to see what their processes are. And finally, after the sale, it often comes as a shock to many homeowners how many things do not sell. In other words, how many things are left over. Even after a very successful sale, there can be a lot of things left over. So we need to have a plan for how to deal with that. And I mentioned in my client story with Chris, she chose not to have the estate sale company do the clean out because she didn't want to pay the extra fee. So many estate sale companies do have clean out as an option. And what it means is that they take care of the things that don't sell. And find out what those fees are, find out what their process is, find out if you have some leeway. So if some very valuable things don't sell, if maybe they can use their own store, their own contacts. And then don't get sticker shock when they quote that amount. Again, people are surprised, like, what do you mean? You already got 40% and now you're charging me extra. Remember that the cost of putting a dumpster on your property in my area, Chicagoland, is going to be around $500. And that's just the cost to get the dumpster. That's not the cost or the work and labor involved to actually fill the dumpster. The cost of one junk hauler truck is usually about $500 to $600. And I'm giving you those benchmarks so that you understand that, that the price, so that you'll understand if the price that the estate sale company quotes you is market, marketable and reasonable. Also, estate sale companies a lot of times have agreements and arrangements with charities to do pickup the day after the sale. So if it's important to you that things go to be donated, to go to benefit the community, rather than just be tossed in a dumpster, ask if that's something that they can help you with. So now it's our last client story. And this was a tough one because this was actually a friend of mine had had a very serious reversal in health, and she needed to move into a long care situation. And she needed to sell her home to help fund the cost of her health care and lodgings. The good news is that we had a buyer who was willing to buy the house and also assume the lease for the solar panels, which had just been placed on the roof. Um, the complicating factor is that he wanted a fast close. It was a cash offer, it was very close to what their original cost was, and then the cost of assuming the solar panel lease was an extra $18,000, which he was willing to pay. But he wanted to be in the house quickly. It was a corporate relocation, and he wanted to be settled before he started his job. And there was almost no way that we can fit in an estate sale. We knew we had family members who were coming in from out of state, and it was important to the homeowner that they have an opportunity to go through her things and take what they wanted. So in order to honor her wishes so that all family members had a chance to walk through the home, we just could not make an estate sale work. So here are, and in this case, it was definitely not worth losing that buyer because of the solar panel lease. It was definitely in the best interest, financial interest, to sell the house. So there can be a lot of reasons why an estate sale might not work for a client or for your unique situation. And a lot of times it's the timing. It's not the right time of year, or it is the summer where many estate sale companies are booked for 2 months out and you have a fast close. There may be unique situations with the home itself. If you have very high-end furnishings or flooring that you don't want to risk damaged, that just may not be it. You may not feel comfortable having people come through your home, and it may be an added stress for the homeowner that they just don't want to have to embark on this whole process. And certainly if they don't need the money, then it's not the right choice for them. It may also be the situation where the homeowner has a lot of high value items, and a estate sale may not be the best option to sell those items. In fact, if you are a homeowner with high value items, the very greatest gift that you can give your adult children is to do the legwork and the research on those items and let them know where that paperwork is, so that they have the provenance, they have the appraisals already done, and they have resources. So if they did need to sell those things, they would know which direction to go in. And finally, not every home is an ideal candidate for an estate sale. Small homes without a lot of things, or having very similar things, not like a wide variety, sometimes they're just not the best fit for an estate sale. So what are our alternatives? Is to try to sell things on our own. We're going to talk about that a little more in depth. It's to share the things that we have with our family, our community. I talk about, clients have a circle of influence. Reach out to that circle to donate, and then donate, through the usual channels to charities or thrift stores. And don't forget that recycling gives us wonderful opportunities to get things out of our home. And then finally, some tips for how to dispose of things. So, should you sell your stuff? The first thing I always caution people is it takes a great deal of time and effort to sell things. Even for selling one thing on Facebook, it usually takes about an hour in total between the time that you take the photos and you make the post and monitor and communicate with people and then stand on your driveway waiting for them to show up. An hour is honestly a conservative estimate. And I always advise my clients is not to let the task of selling the contents of the home delay them from selling the home. But here are some tips that can help you get value when you don't have a lot of time. And first thing, cherry pick. And by cherry pick, I mean focus on selling the items in the home that have the highest value. Start with the most expensive things or set a minimum value. So like maybe you're not working to sell things that can't be sold for more than $200. If you have the resources, so like maybe you have a lot of young adults in your family that are willing to help out, a garage sale can be a great choice, especially if you offer them a percentage. You'll get a little harder working young adults or teenagers. I've also had clients who will partner up with friends and then they will have garage sales together, one at one of their houses, and then later in the season they'll have one at the other person's house, and then they just kind of team up their resources, and that's a great solution. Facebook and Marketplace, Facebook Marketplace and Nextdoor are great solutions. And I found it successful if you have a lot of small things to put them together in lots. I had a client who had a lot of small camping things. So we put them together, put them in a bin that she did not want to keep, and we bundled the group together and sold it for $75. We had somebody at the house within 2 hours who wanted that whole bin. So it was a great way for her to get a bin and all of its contents out of her house and make a little money on the side. And then don't forget consignment stores. Um, Consigners can handle clothing, they can handle decor, they can handle furniture, or a mix. It just depends on the store. And this is actually an option that I pursued because when I downsized, my old house had a formal living room and my new house does not. So I knew I had some newer furniture that was not going to fit in the new home. So I chose to take it to a consignment furniture store, and they did the legwork and the work of selling it for me. And, as it sold, they would send me checks, and it was kind of nice. And then the final option is buyouts. There are different types of buyouts, but there are companies that will come onto your property and they will take things back to their warehouses and they will sell them in their own environment so that you're not having an estate sale um, in your home. Usually the best targets for these are people who do have a lot of high volume, high value things. And also there are companies that will do a type of buyout where they clean out the whole house and they offset the cost of the clean out against what they expect to make from selling things. And this can be a great way to control cost when you're on a tight deadline. In fact, we had a client do this 2 summers ago. He was moving to a senior apartment. His kids were adult, but they both lived out of state and they were helping him, but we were on a tight deadline. So we brought in a company and they estimated, they gave him kind of a quick ballpark of what they thought that they could market things for and what it would cost them to clean out the whole house. And they quoted him a cost of $1,200. So a week later, they were there with a full moving truck, 6 uniformed guys, and they emptied the house and everything in it. So the very full garage, the very full basement that also had some moldy things in it because they'd had a water leak. All the items that the client, in this case, he'd already moved, so we were sure that there was nothing in the house left that he wanted because he'd had that chance to do that final walkthrough. And the family was thrilled because in one day, one crew managed to empty that entire house, and the realtor was able to get the house painted and on the market really, really quickly, which benefited that family's unique situation. When you're thinking about sharing things, obviously you think of your family and your friends and your community. I always advise people that a great way to get people to take things is first to stage them. So make them aware either with your tape system, or maybe you kind of combine things in one bay of your garage or one room of your house so that people know the items that you're not taking and that are available to be shared. And I also advise people to ask open-ended questions. Don't say, "Don't you want to take this?" Instead say, "Would you like to take this?" We're more likely to get an honest answer. And one of the hardest things to do is to accept when the answer is no, but it's much better to know that they don't want it and you can make other arrangements than getting down to the deadline of a house closing when you still have a lot of things in the home that you thought your family was going to pick up. And I always advise when you're communicating with family and friends, be sure you put a deadline on that pickup well in advance of the close, because you want those things out of the house and not dealing with them while you're dealing with all the other last minute things involved in closing a home. Also, consider other people in your circle of influence, your house cleaners, your landscapers, your neighbors, the guy that came to paint the living room. These are, if you have tools or if you have cleaning things, these are great resources that just say, hey, just so you know, we're not taking these 3 bags of fertilizer. Would you like them? Most landscapers will pick them up and take them with them. So it's like a great way to kind of get some of those bulky, odd things out of your home. And then speaking of giving things away, donations are typically what we think of when we are giving to charities or to large thrift stores. This is a big part of what I do as a professional organizer, especially when I'm working with clients that are on a longer timeline. In other words, they know that they need to downsize and they're planning a move in their future, but there's no definitive timeline set yet. And they've decided that rather than have an estate sale, they'd rather just go through their things and make those donations and gradually reclaim the space in the house. And then that way, when the right house does pop up, or when there are other circumstances that make moving a necessity, they're ready to move. So obviously, taking things directly to donation centers. And I have a photo here of the truck from Restore. I love doing this when we have like a move, where I'll have movers put all the furniture that is being donated in the garage so that a charity can pick it up. A lot of times they can't come in the house, but they can pick it up from the garage. And this is a really cost-effective way to get a house cleared of big items like furniture or bigger decor and things like that. And then finally, there's sometimes things can't be marketed, so and they can't be donated. So those are the things we're going to recycle or dispose of. And one of the best avenues for disposing of things are the waste service that you already have. So maybe you have Waste Management or LRS or Groot. Call them and see what their boundaries are in your area. Like for me, for example, they don't have a scheduled bulk pickup, but they will pick up bulk items for a small fee. I have clients in Cary that their waste management company will pick up bulk items every week. So explore that option first. Sometimes they can even drop off some extra bins so that you have more capacity as you're sorting and going through things to throw things away. Look for community and seasonal drives. So household chemicals, shredding, the styrofoam that we all have piled up in our garage. This is a great way to get those things out of our house. And don't forget that paper and electronic drives may have sensitive information on them. We want to dispose of them properly. In fact, if you look at the slide, the first photo is my car and me taking a photo early in the morning. I'm at AMS Shredding in Crystal Lake, and we've dropped off a bunch of paper that needs to be shredded, and we brought in some laptops and hard drives that they're going to destroy for us. And it probably cost the homeowner about $200 to do that particular run, but that is a drop in the bucket to the cost of dealing with identity theft. So we want to be sure that those sensitive things are disposed of properly. And major junk hauling companies, in this area, we have junk loggers, we have 1-800-GOT-JUNK, we have Junk King and other smaller companies. These are wonderful resources. They have great guys. A lot of their guys are former movers, so that when they're carrying that bulky couch out of your basement that's 40 years old, they're not going to bang it into the wall. They're going to be careful, and they do. They pick up the heavy things and help get them out of your home. And they've definitely been an amazing resource for me when I help people downsize. And they even do demolition. If you look at that photo on the right, that is about 8 years ago, and it was a February day where it was about 7 degrees. And the homeowners were very close to closing, and the new homeowners had let them know that they did not want the broken hot tub. They wanted it gone before closing. So our junk haulers came in, they brought out their sawzalls, and they cut that giant hot tub into pieces and loaded it on the truck and swept the patio, and they were gone by lunch. And the homeowners were thrilled because it meant that their closing wasn't in jeopardy, or they weren't having to deal with having to pay an extra fee to the new home buyers. So at the end of the day, my work with my company or as owner of OrganizeWell is just make the downsizing process simple, less stressful, and easier to do. As a follow-up to this presentation, I will be sharing a handout and some additional resources. And if you have any additional questions, I'm always available. You can find me at my website at organizewell.com. My phone number, 815-715-0260, or just email me at paularipple@organizewell.com. Thanks so much.